Go to allthingsliberty.com after you go to radionemo.com. We actually have a link to All Things Liberty over on our website. Speaking of links, we've got one on the nightstand over at our Sleeper Cab library. Utterly delighted to have Gene Procknow join us this morning. He is the author of William Hunter, Finding Free Speech, a British soldier who became an early American. It's our pleasure to welcome him, Gene Procknow. Congratulations, by the way, on getting the book out.
Thank you, Jimmy. It's been a labor of love. It's taken 4.5 years of my life to complete, and it's really captivated me, and hopefully will captivate my readers.
So let's talk about you for a second here. So you're a former management consultant, and like so many people that we've talked to from All Things Liberty, what began as kind of a hobby and a tinkering has turned into a deep passion. But let's talk about where you came from and your overall kind of obsession, fascination, and the joy that you take from researching the American Revolution and the colonial period as well. Kind of unpack that for us.
Yeah, well, I'm a Midwesterner at heart. I was born in Illinois and went to school there, and that's not necessarily the seedbed of the revolution, but I ended up moving to Boston to take a job, and really fell in love with the history of the area and the revolution. And so, even though I worked as a consultant, as you mentioned, I spent my nights and weekends investigating and researching the American Revolution, and I was fortunate to be able to retire early, and this has become my full time job. I write and research full time, and it's been a labor of love. I've got two sons and a wife that are also supportive of that and very interested in the revolution, so it kind of makes it a family affair.
Yeah, and there really is something fun about growing up, or actually, I'll ask my question. So, when you made the move out there for the job, how old were your sons when you first got to the cradle of the revolution?
Oh, they were 3 or 5 years old, and but I would take them
Fantastic.
out. We walked the road to Lexington and Concord, and they enjoyed it. They really liked the reenactments and reenactors, and so that kind of got their interest in, and kind of kept the family together. And I enjoyed the history, and they enjoyed watching the guns being fired.
Well, I'll tell you this too, by the way, Gene. I spent my life growing up walking Chalmette Battlefield with my dad. We would take Boy Scout trips. We did the 14-mile hikes at Shiloh, did some hikes at Gettysburg as well. There is something, and Dave Nemo and I and Cheryl, we were having dinner last night talking about how we all had done at different times walking the Civil War battlefield of Franklin, Tennessee, and getting those stories as well too. There really is something kind of special, not just about walking that kind of hollowed ground, but doing it with people you love as well. And it really does become a really great bonding thing. You make a lot of friends, but you also kind of really kind of connect with the people in your life that you love, and you kind of share that together. And in some ways, the story that you end up getting for this book here, and we'll get to other stuff that you've done as well too, but there really is something kind of marvelous about finding somebody who is discovering something as well. And this is part of what you've written about here is the part and process of discovering what it means to become an American along with every other person who's in the process of that becoming. Is that fair? Tell us about the book.
Yeah, well, the book is about a fellow named William Hunter, and he wrote, as you mentioned, the only surviving diary written by a child of a British soldier during the American Revolution. And so I discovered this document by serendipity here in where I live in Washington D.C. now, and it was owned by a family here in D.C. The document actually now is um, at the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia, so people actually can see it now for themselves when they go to that museum. But it's a one of a kind document. It's about 50 pages, handwritten document. It describes William's experiences during the American Revolution. Back in the 18th century, families traveled with their husbands in at war. So when you went to war as a British soldier, you brought your family with you. So at a very early age, William experienced combat. He saw wounded and dead soldiers. He witnessed death personally. He saw his father being egregiously injured. So he grew up very, very fast, much faster than people do today. But it's a story of it goes beyond that because he ends up going back to England, becoming a printer and a printing apprentice and learning the printing trade. And then he decides to come to the United States to find free speech, which is a quintessential American trait to want to have free speech and want to live in a freedom and democracy society. And he wanted to do that and couldn't live in the monocracy of the British Empire. So he came to the United States. He founded the second newspaper west of the Alleghenies, and became the first editor to oppose the Alien and Sedition Acts, which were a real restraint. At least the Sedition Act was a real restraint on our democracy, and so it is a quintessential American story.
Well, and I really want to make this really clear, and you've unpacked a lot of this already. There's so many things at play. Is that so many colonialists, not the big players, but people who were colonists, never saw much of the world beyond the small confines of their farm. And, one of the things about a war is that it tends to open up an opportunity for travel that would not exist for a lot of people. I mean, you could make a case that the fact that this country has not fought a major war with everybody on board has really limited a lot of Americans' travel to this very day. This is a guy who actually saw a lot of what would become the original 13 colonies, saw a lot of Canada, saw a lot of the high seas, saw a lot of, what was considered the civilized world at that point. So he's got a really kind of, not international view, but kind of a wide view as well, and becomes very enamored with the idea of telling stories. I'm gonna put the break on there for a second. Dre, we'll take the break here and let Gene kind of marinate on that. And I would like you, when we come back, to talk about how that free speech translates into also an ability to tell stories in an important and immediate way through newspaper editing. We'll be right back with Gene Procknow. His book is wonderful, by the way. Head on over to the Sleeper Cab library page on RadioNemo.com and check it out. Dre, break us away. We'll be right back. In trucking, financial security and retirement isn't a guaranteed destination. That's why Truckers Wealth is here. A financial hub designed for you, Truckers Wealth combines expert advice and tailored solutions. Tax-free wealth plans grow your nest egg. Guaranteed income retirement accounts provide stability, and no market risk accounts protect your investments. That's hard-earned money, a steady stream of income, reliable growth. That's a retirement. That's a destination worth investing in. That's Truckers Wealth. Truckers-wealth.com. Experts dedicated to your success. Live hard, drive hard. Shady Rays has got you. If you want a pair of sunglasses that keeps up with your adventure on the road, Shady Rays has got you. If you want to keep your eyes on the journey ahead with a price point right for your lifestyle, Shady Rays has got you. Premium polarized sunglasses with a lost and broken protection program and 30-day risk-free returns and exchanges. Drop in that code RadioNemo at ShadyRays.com and get a 35% discount, and make sure you can see where the action is. They got you at ShadyRays.com.
Did you know it's extremely easy to join the Wreaths Across America mission to remember our fallen heroes, while at the same time honoring those who are currently serving our country and their families? Plus, you're helping to teach our younger generation about the value of freedom. With just one $17 donation to Wreaths Across America, you're sponsoring a fresh Maine Balsam Remembrance Wreath. They've really become a symbol of America's respect for those who bravely served and are no longer with us. To sponsor your wreath, just visit wreathsacrossamerica.org. That's wreathsacrossamerica.org.
And now back to Revolution Road with the Journal of the American Revolution.
So Gene joins us this morning. It's good to have you back. And I'm not sure if you really got where I was coming from when I asked that question, but talk about the obsession with telling stories. I mean, he's a newspaper man. At the end of the day, the obsession with free speech ends up, becoming literally kind of, becomes a newspaper man to a large extent. Talk about that as well.
Yes, he ends up founding the second newspaper west of the Alleghenies. Then he moves to in Pennsylvania, and then he moves to Kentucky to found a newspaper. And back then, newspapers were that was the internet of their age, right? That was the principal way you learned news outside your community. Newspapers did not print local news because everybody knew the local news. You didn't need to print that newspaper because you knew that by talking with your neighbor. But the way you got news, national news, international news, was through the newspaper, and you had to be able to trust that newspaper to have a news accounts that were actually accurate and real. And so the newspaper person became the editor, became the trusted advisor within the local community. And so he ended up, his most prominent paper was in Frankfort, Kentucky, and he would hire, this would be very interesting for the listeners, he would hire post writers and wagon masters to distribute his paper throughout the state and throughout actually the Northwest Territories. So his newspaper got a broader set of distribution than just one town, and that was typical back then. But what happened to William was that he had a real view that free speech was very important. And so when John Adams passed, or Congress passed, and John Adams signed the Sedition Act, which put a brake on free speech, it basically made criticism of the government illegal. I mean, something we would find anathema today. But that back then, if you criticized the government could prosecute you under the Sedition Act. And that act was passed in June of 1798, and in early July, William Hunter published the first editorial that opposed that act. And for that publication, he could have gone to jail. He could have gone to jail. He could have been fined. The fines were up to $4,000. Back then, $4,000 was like $1 million today. I mean, it would bankrupt him and his family forever if he had to pay that fine. And it's really interesting because there are documents within the Adams administration which basically evaluated prosecuting William Hunter. And so the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, they recommended to John Adams that they take William to court and prosecute him for this publishing this editorial. But Adams decided not to do that. And basically, it's because he didn't think he could get a conviction in Kentucky. Back then, Kentucky was very much a liberal Jeffersonian democracy type state. And so the people there weren't going to really support prosecuting William Hunter. So they actually did not. However, Adams did prosecute 26 other newspaper editors for doing the same thing and around the country. So William was pretty courageous. That's a very courageous thing to do. He was very fortunate that he lived in Kentucky and was kind of protected by his fellow citizens. But it was a very courageous thing to do, and something that's kind of really a story to remember today and it's got a lot of relevance today.
Well, and the other thing about Kentucky, and I want to kind of point this out, this is a geographical kind of thing, is that Virginia and West Virginia are still the same state, and Kentucky is, many people, as far as they're concerned about the Jeffersonian ideal, it really is kind of what I call we're actually the real inheritors of the original Virginia kind of mentality, that sort of small Republican Jeffersonian sort of view of the world, of like the independent operator out there on his lonesome, telling his tale and making a stand for the individual rights of man. I mean, that's the kind of the imagination by which your character kind of inhabits the world, correct?
Absolutely, and William Hunter was a strong advocate of and supporter of Thomas Jefferson. Their political beliefs were very much aligned, and in fact, even late in life, people remarked about how William Hunter helped with the Revolution of 1800, which was the election of Thomas Jefferson to the presidency, which replace the Federalist Party and with the Jeffersonian Democratic Republican Party, and which really helped build American democracy and strengthen democracy and brought democracy to really the common person, and eliminated the restraint on voting to property restraints and other restraints, and Kentucky was at the forefront of that.
And speaking of that, speaking of individual rights and people he supported, he becomes an Andrew Jackson supporter. By the way, give our listeners, how long does he live? How old is he when he passes off this mortal coil?
He's 86 years old.
Yeah,
It's
presidents, served 8 presidents, right?
Yeah, and believe it or not, he served 8 presidents, and he never got a pay raise in government, and he got a $200 a year deduction in his last 2 years. So I mean, this guy, and he ferreted out a lot of fraud and abuse. So he contributed a lot, and he didn't get rich by doing it.
Yeah, and the gravitational pull towards Jackson is really interesting as well too, because there's a lot of misunderstandings of who Jackson is. I'm really curious in regards to working with primary sources here. So at the core of all of this, in order to kind of construct this sort of, I'm loath to call it simply a biography, because what it is, it's a biography with a thesis, but it's also using Hunter in many ways to kind of become symbolic and a metonym of sorts for the country's own kind of growing understanding of what it means to be a free speech absolutist to some degree. There's a lot at play in here. But at the core of this are some really important primary sources. Can you talk about what it means to work with primary sources and how tempting it can be to let it kind of boulderize the rest of the work?
Yes, and I mean, you're absolutely right. You have to be very cautious when you use primary sources. My book is based on mostly primary sources. I mean, there are a few secondary sources in there, but it's mostly primary sources. Hunter's diary covers the first 25 years of his life, so I had to reconstruct his life, the remaining years of his life from other primary sources. And so that came from letters. His newspapers are very much a primary source that I used. But as you're right, that they do have a partisan view. Back then, newspapers were just as partisan as they are today.
Ooh,
in fact, they may be even
worse.
more partisan. Yes, yeah. And in fact, to elect Andrew Jackson, they needed to get more votes out of Louisville, Kentucky. So William Hunter actually went to Louisville to start a newspaper just to get votes for Jackson there. And once Jackson was elected, he shut down the newspaper. So, the newspapers are highly partisan back then, more so actually than probably today. So if we think we're partisan today, they were very partisan back then. But I use you have to interpret the primary sources, and best thing to do around that is to triangulate, is to get two primary sources to point at one event. And that way you get a better sense whether that is truth or not, or you're getting some kind of angle on it, or some kind of partisanship view on something. So that's what I did, is I looked for multiple primary sources to verify the information that I used in the book.
Oh, I want to get back to this for a second, though. I mean, the number of breathtaking things that get said in newspapers from that kind of time period. That's the other problem too. It's like, what a great primary source, except literally someone is a paid propaganda hack, literally eviscerating some political opponent. But the great strength of what it is you do is that you look at primary sources that often counter them, and sometimes, every once in a while, if you read in between the lines of both sides, you'll find something close to the truth, right?
Absolutely, and I would look at newspapers from the other side. Look at Federalist newspapers that would be opposing the Democratic Republican newspapers of the time. And so, and by the way, the newspaper wars back there were fierce, and that's one of the fun things I look at the book. I look at 1 week, one paper would publish something against what William Hunter believed, and William Hunter would publish the next week something that countered that argument. So it was actually kind of fun to reconstruct those arguments.
It's an online argument. it
Yeah,
plays out like a
yeah,
thread. It plays like this thread saying, "You're just a moron. You're a libtard." I mean, some of the
yeah. Oh,
stuff they
yes.
tell people is just. I mean, people would walk away butthurt if they got told that stuff
Oh, I
today.
know.
It's
Oh, I know.
brutal.
In fact, one of the most famous things is that they criticized William Hunter. They said he kind of lived behind the skirts of his wife because his wife was so smart that he was getting all his views from his wife, and they were criticizing for that. So it's pretty funny how that worked. He did have a very smart wife, and I believe his wife's name is Anne, and I do believe she was a real benefit to him in his businesses. Back then, you almost needed you needed a business partner to work with you, and his wife was his principal business partner. And by the way, and when he died at 86, she raised a 7-foot obelisk over his grave site and Congressional Cemetery here in D.C. So they had a really good relationship. I can guarantee you that. Nobody would do that unless you had a phenomenal marriage.
Yeah, or you could cash in with a lot of money, and that wasn't the case here. I'm going to tell you something
No,
else too.
they didn't.
They,
That
they
basically
didn't.
took his income. No, they had very. He died with very little money.
They were dedicated to the
Uh,
cause of liberty and the cause of free speech as well. Do you feel like that this book is a step towards giving a really unique sort of American life the due it deserves?
yes, I do. I think it's an example of a person that moved to the United States to find freedom. You know, that is something that happened throughout our 250 years of the United States. It demonstrates someone who's used their intellectual capabilities and economic capital to build a new community. You know, and he helped build new communities in on the Western frontier. I didn't mention this, but when he moved to Frankfurt, you know, it was basically the Indian Wars were still going on. So, you know, it was risky, and it was, it had to be pretty intrepid to do that.
Pretty.
I think,
It's an exciting read, Gene. I tell you what, we're going to get you back on at some point before we shuffle off this radio coil. But I got to close the show out, man. You're welcome back anytime. He's a former management consultant who has become an incredible expert on all things liberty and the Revolutionary War. Gene Procknow has joined us this morning. Guys, go over to our Sleeper Cab library on radionemo.com. It is a featured book on the nightstand. William Hunter, Finding Free Speech, a British soldier who became an early American. Everywhere books are sold. Go to geneprocknow.com. That's Procknow. Thank you, Gene.
yeah, thank you very much, Jimmy. Very much enjoyed speaking with you today.
You as well.